In the latest episode of Fantasy Island, Isla returns and begins to poison Ruby against Elena, and luckily for Elena, this comes as her relationship starts to heal with Javier, even though he calls her out in the same way that Ruby does by the end of the episode. So let's jump into this Isla situation real quick. Isla's return comes with a bit of controversy, mainly in not her revealing to Ruby she's a mermaid, but in her revealing that Elena is the reason why she stayed away. With that, you have to remember that Ruby may have the body of a 20-something-year-old, but she's somebody who probably is old enough to be Elena's mom. So with that in mind, the idea of Elena trying to control her or dictate her life like she's still a guest and this is all part of an extended fantasy, she doesn't like that. But at the same time, even though Elena doesn't fully tell us what goes on when it comes to mermaids and what they're capable of, we get to see it firsthand. For it goes beyond their song of seduction and, them perhaps trying to recruit people like Isla's trying to recruit Ruby. It seems they also have the ability to make you forget your life outside of the island and maybe forget people outside of them. And this is shown when, as the guest this episode's departing, Ruby is starting to forget who Mel is, which, even with her going on this new journey as a lesbian, Mel has always been someone she's referenced, especially when talking to guests. So for her to start forgetting who that is a serious red flag. But while Elena and Ruby have issues, eventually it comes to the point where Elena does give a sort of half apology in terms of her apologizing for overstepping but not apologizing for warning Ruby. And with that, they make peace. And the same can be said when it comes to Elena and Javier. You can tell that Javier is now kind of over whatever issues he had in the last 1 or 2 episodes, and now he wants to reconcile, and things go to the point where the two even sleep together. But he does call out Elena just as Ruby did for trying to control the situation, especially as she seemingly wants to kind of take a few steps back in terms of what they're doing and maybe reflect a little bit. But it's not clear whether or not Javier is for this or if he's going to keep trying to push her to open up once more and really take him seriously and the potential of their relationships. So right now, when it comes to Elena and Javier, it's hard to say where that's going or if it's going anywhere, because Elena's back to being a bit hot and cold depending on what subject matter is and what her mood is. This leads us to this week's guest. Laura is this week's guest, and her story is that throughout her whole life, she has been very appeasing when it comes to her parents, Arthur and Melanie, and she was even appeasing to them when it came to her wedding to a man named Brad, in terms of changing their wedding song that Brad and her chose in order to accommodate her mother because her mother was uncomfortable because it reminded her of some song that Arthur played for his second wife. Because she made that change for the sake of her parents, Brad got upset and left her at the altar, which leads to her coming to Fantasy Island just wanting a fantasy of being loved, seemingly without conditions, and so pops in Peaches. Peaches is Laura's imaginary friend from when she was a tween, and while Peaches gives her that love and care and everything that she needs at first, after some point Peaches pushes Laura to get that kind of love from somebody who's real, i.e. her parents. And she does this by pushing Laura and even exposing Laura's diary so that her parents can actually understand how Laura has been feeling about them since she was a teenager and they had a nasty divorce. Because one of the things that Arthur and Melanie have done is kind of put Laura in a position where she feels like she can't do anything for one without doing it for the other because she doesn't want to show favoritism. That's making it so they have almost like a ping pong match with Laura being the ball about who gets what, who gets this type of favor, who gets this type of compliment. And even to a certain point, the parents also trying to compete with each other in order to get her love. But she decides to shut that down, and eventually the parents come to the point of putting up, or else probably better said, respecting Laura's boundaries, and even trying to apologize to Brad and make sure that even though he left at the altar, and also Laura's mom called everybody to let them know what happened, at the very least, maybe Brad and her can go back to the original plans for the wedding. Instead of having this big thing that her mother and her father planned, just having a small intimate thing, or even maybe a justice of the peace. So the highlight for us when it comes to this episode is Elena going against Ruby and an extension Isla. And one of the main reasons why we find this to be the highlight is because if you look at Ruby's journey, especially regarding love, and you look at Elena's journey, Elena's someone who's very much hesitant about love and any sense of losing control due to feelings. Ruby, on the other hand, seems to want to feel and experience everything, and though she has experienced heartache, she's still open to the idea of finding love and truly honoring this second chance at life. So with that in mind, as you watch Elena, even if she's being friendly and trying to protect Ruby, you can see this woman who doesn't know how to truly love people, who is very hesitant and scared about it, trying to give you advice, trying to warn you, and you're someone who's potentially twice her age. It's like, as much as you understand that Elena knows the island, knows the creatures around it, at the same time, you can see Ruby kind of feels offended that she's not given some credit, that she could have common sense. You can see why she got upset. But I have to also add in, it'll be very interesting to see how the island potentially plays a part in this. For the island chose Ruby for a reason, and Isla, whether she's giving magic to the island or whatever, she's trying to poach somebody who the island chose to be the second to the host. And even though it's still very confusing how the island, the host, and maybe the host's assistant interact with the magic and how things work, there's no denying that there's a certain balance that's involved with having these sun characters, and whether or not the island ejects itself or allows things to fall apart and what's the aftermath of it letting falling things apart is something that I'm interested to see. So the second highlight for us deals with Laura's storyline and just how Fantasy Island, not consistently, but sometimes, knows how to touch into the darkness of a guest and really make it so it can pull out an emotional story out of them. We saw that in the last episode when it came to issues of having a child, and in this episode, even though when it comes to Arthur and Melanie, they're kind of comical in some ways, there's something about Laura relying on this exuberant, exaggerated, very extroverted, certainly need to be reeled in Peaches, that it kind of helps you understand how bad things probably got for her. If you need someone who is this loud to perhaps drown out all negative feelings and thoughts, Nevermind is so over the top when it comes to loving and compassion that it's supposed to seemingly, at least the way I saw it, fill a void for you. So the first on the fence topic is just how underutilized Segundo is. He is the key to so much information, yet we don't get to tap into any of it. We don't get to tap into learning about hosts before Elena, including the one that could be locked behind that door. We don't get to learn much about Elena's time through him so that we can understand not just what happened with her first person who was a guest, but also all that time between the first guest and Ruby, since it seems until Ruby showed up, she didn't start to really resolve all of her issues from before she became the host. Never mind, considering Segundo's been there so long, it'll be good to get some of his history and knowledge, since he may know something about the mermaids. I mean, who knows if Segundo's some type of magical creature? And just, it's like with the island. The island holds so many secrets and questions and mysteries that you want to know about, and so does Segundo, yet increasingly it feels like you're never going to learn the answers that you may seek. You just have to accept the fact that this show, it'll give you enough storyline each episode to stay invested in the characters, but in terms of getting the kind of in-depth emotional stuff that we've gotten with some of the guests, that's going to be few and far between. Case in point, when it comes to the second on the fence topic, Elena Javier. As noted when Helene was around, to me, the best way to develop characters isn't through their romantic entanglements. Elena and Segundo, Dada's relationship, whether you want to look at it as friends or a paternal one, where she can develop as a person and perhaps be ready to actually love someone. And then when it comes to Javier, the problem with him is that as soon as he gets involved with Elena, it becomes all about Elena. it becomes all about the relationship. And he, as a person, is pretty much replaceable because he becomes nothing more than the guy who flies the plane, drives the boat, and is the boss's love interest. And it kind of stinks because we keep getting teased, or at least in season 1 we got teased, that he's had this amazing life in terms of perhaps being in the military, traveling the world. And as for how he got to Fantasy Island, hell, how Segundo got to Fantasy Island, when I think about it, that's not gone into. And yet these are characters who we've met and known since the beginning. And I get this, I don't think Fantasy Island's considered an ensemble, but at the same time, clearly Elena's gonna be very cagey. So can she, if she's not gonna tell us a lot of things, at least be like a Trojan horse so other people can tell their stories?